2004. Las Vegas, Nevada. A woman. An inheritance. A man who had done this before. He was charming, attentive, everything she had been looking for. He was also everything she never saw coming. $280,000. Gone. To accounts she had never seen. In a name she never knew. He had done it before. Another woman. Another state. Another life destroyed. She was never the first. He had a flight booked for the following week. He almost made it. This is Catherine's story. Her name was Catherine, 38 years old, a certified public accountant living in Las Vegas, Nevada, a woman who had spent 15 years building a career defined by precision, attention to detail, and an understanding of financial systems that most people never developed. She was independent in the way that comes from having built everything yourself, her apartment, her savings, her professional reputation. And she was proud of that independence in a quiet way that didn't require anyone else's acknowledgement to feel real. In 2003, her father passed away after a long illness, a loss that hit her harder than she had anticipated, not just emotionally but practically, because her father had been her closest confidant and the person she had always called when a decision felt too large to make alone. He left her an inheritance of $340,000, money she did not spend immediately, money she invested carefully and conservatively, money she thought of as her father's last act of taking care of her from a distance she was still learning to navigate. 6 months after the inheritance arrived, she met Daniel at a professional networking event downtown, a man who was well-dressed, well-spoken, and possessed of a particular kind of attentiveness that made the person he was talking to feel like the most interesting person in the room. He was 42 years old, told her he worked in real estate investment, had a confidence that felt earned rather than performed, and showed a genuine interest in her work and her life that she had not encountered often enough to be suspicious of when she finally did. They dated for 8 months, dinners, weekends away, introductions to each other's friends, and Catherine, who had always been cautious in relationships, found herself moving faster than she normally would because everything about Daniel felt considered and real and safe. They married in the spring of 2004. A small ceremony, close friends and family, a reception at a restaurant Catherine loved. And she stood at that event feeling something she had not felt in years, a sense that the part of her life she had been most uncertain about had finally found its shape. The financial conversations began within 3 months of the wedding, Daniel suggesting that keeping separate accounts created unnecessary complexity, that consolidating their finances would make planning easier and their partnership more genuine, that the inheritance sitting in a separate account was an inefficiency they could address together. Catherine was an accountant. She knew better than most people what financial consolidation meant and what it required, and she set conditions, asked questions, reviewed the joint account structure carefully before agreeing, and believed that her professional knowledge would protect her from the kind of mistakes she had seen clients make. What she did not know, could not have known from the information available to her, was that Daniel had done all of this before, in a different state, with a different woman, and that the man sitting across from her at their kitchen table discussing account structures had spent years learning exactly how to make a financially literate woman feel like her caution had been satisfied. The first transfer from the inheritance account happened in late 2004. $45,000 moved to a joint investment account that Daniel managed, described as a real estate opportunity with a short timeline that required quick movement of capital. Catherine reviewed the investment documentation Daniel provided. It was professional, detailed, and consistent with how legitimate real estate investment documents looked, and she approved the transfer because she had checked the things she knew to check and found nothing that triggered concern. The investment did not materialize. Daniel explained it with a story about a partner pulling out at the last moment, a delay in financing that was outside his control, a timeline that would be pushed to the following quarter. And Catherine accepted the explanation because it was plausible and because she had no reason yet to look for the reason not to. Over the following 18 months, the pattern repeated 7 more times, each transfer accompanied by documentation that was professional and detailed, each delay explained with specificity and apparent transparency, each conversation handled by Daniel with the calm competence of someone who had rehearsed every possible response. By early 2006, $280,000 of Catherine's $340,000 inheritance had been moved through accounts she had formally agreed to, but never fully controlled, into structures that Daniel managed and that she had trusted him to manage because he had given her every reason to believe her trust was justified. The discovery happened on a Tuesday evening in April 2006. A contractor doing bathroom renovation work found a section of wall that didn't sound right when he knocked on it, opened it up, and found a small steel safe that had been installed behind the original drywall. Catherine was in the house when the contractor called her over. She stood in the bathroom doorway looking at the safe for a long moment before the contractor left for the evening, and then she was alone with something she had never known was there. The safe opened with a combination she found written on a piece of paper tucked inside Daniel's winter coat pocket, something she found while looking for something else entirely. A coincidence so unlikely that she would later describe it as the only moment in the entire experience that felt like something was working in her favor. Inside the safe were documents that rearranged everything she understood about her marriage, her finances, and the man she had been living with for 2 years, a second identity document in a different name, bank account statements for accounts she had never seen, and a marriage certificate from Arizona dated 2001. The Arizona marriage certificate was made out to a woman named Sandra, and it had never been legally dissolved, which meant that Daniel's marriage to Catherine was bigamous, legally void from the moment it was performed, and that the financial access she had granted him as her husband had been obtained through a fraudulent legal status. Also in the safe, documents showing that Sandra had lost $190,000 in an identical scheme between 2001 and 2003, that Daniel had disappeared from Arizona with the money before Sandra had fully understood what had happened, and that he had relocated to Nevada and rebuilt the same profile within months of leaving. Catherine called the police that night, not the next morning, not after consulting anyone, but that night, standing in her bathroom with the safe open in front of her. And she was precise and organized when she spoke to the detective who took her call, because 15 years of professional training did not stop functioning just because her personal life had collapsed. Investigators confirmed everything in the safe within 48 hours: the Arizona marriage, Sandra's case which had been filed and gone cold, the account structures Daniel had used to move Catherine's money, and a one-way flight booked in Daniel's name departing Las Vegas 7 days from the date Catherine had found the safe. He was arrested at the airport on the morning of his scheduled departure. Plainclothes detectives positioned at the gate before he arrived, Daniel walking toward them with luggage and a calm that dissolved the moment he understood what was happening and that there was nowhere left to go. He was charged with fraud, bigamy, forgery, financial exploitation, and interstate financial crimes. The Arizona charges were reopened simultaneously, and prosecutors from both states coordinated to build a combined case that reflected the full scope of what Daniel had done across 2 states and 2 victims. Sandra was located and contacted by Nevada investigators. She had spent 3 years believing she had no recourse, that the money was gone and the man was gone and the system had nothing to offer her. And learning that he had been caught produced a reaction she later described as something she did not have a word for. Daniel's trial took place in 2008. Catherine testified, Sandra testified, the forensic financial evidence was presented across 4 days of proceedings, and the defense's attempt to characterize the financial transfers as legitimate investment activity collapsed under the weight of the documentation investigators had assembled. He was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. Asset seizure proceedings recovered approximately $180,000 that was returned to Catherine, while Sandra recovered nothing because Daniel had spent her money completely in the years between leaving Arizona and arriving in Nevada. Catherine said in an interview after the verdict, "I am an accountant, I check numbers for a living, and he still found a way through every check I ran. And I want people to understand that this is not about being naive. It is about someone who had practiced this long enough to know exactly where a careful person's attention would go, and exactly where to hide what they didn't want found." Romance fraud and financial exploitation through intimate relationships is one of the fastest growing categories of financial crime in the United States. The FBI estimates that Americans lose over $1 billion annually to romance-based fraud schemes, with victims spanning every education level, income bracket, and professional background. The most effective perpetrators are not detectable through ordinary caution. They are detectable only through the kind of independent financial verification that feels uncomfortable to perform on someone you love and trust, which is precisely why they are effective. If you are entering a financial relationship with a romantic partner, regardless of how much you trust them, regardless of how long you have known them, independent legal and financial verification of their identity, their history, and their existing legal status is not a sign of distrust. It is a sign of reasonable self-protection. Catherine rebuilt her financial life over the following years. The $180,000 recovered through asset seizure was significantly less than what had been taken, but it was enough to provide a foundation, and she has spoken publicly about her experience specifically to reach people who might recognize something in her story before it reaches the point hers did. Subscribe to Dark Chapters US, because there are many more chapters left to uncover, and none of them are easy to read.